Welcome to day 245 of the New Way. We've talked about the confusion over the Old Testament prophecies concerning the arrival of the Messiah. We talked about that on day 136. Now we are faced with a similar problem for his future return. We know a lot of the key events that will happen, but we don't know in what order they will occur, and certainly not when. I believe one key to understanding these prophecies is to start with a definition of end times. I believe we are currently living in end times. I believe that every day is bringing us closer to Jesus' return. I believe that end times began the day Jesus ascended into heaven 40 days after his resurrection. We'll get to this later. I believe it ends when Jesus returns. So all of these writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were living in end times when they wrote their manuscripts in the first century. And they believed that Jesus would return soon because they saw these predictions begin to happen. So we've been in end times for almost 2,000 years. If you keep this definition of end times as we go through this study, I believe it will help you sort out what Jesus is saying. I'll reread Matthew 24, 1 through 2. Jesus left the temple and was walking away when his disciples came up to him to call his attention to its buildings. "Do you see all these things?" he asked. "Truly I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down." And I'll reread Mark 13, 1 and 2. As Jesus was leaving the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what massive stones, what magnificent buildings." "Do you see all these buildings?" replied Jesus. "Not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down." And now let's add Luke's version in Luke 21, 5 and 6. Some of his disciples were remarking about how the temple was adorned with beautiful stones and with gifts dedicated to God. But Jesus said, "As for what you see here, the time will come when not one stone will be left on another. Every one of them will be thrown down." In 70 AD, it happened. The Romans destroyed the temple and most of Jerusalem. They literally threw these massive stones, one by one, down into the Kidron Valley ravine below. And they are still there today. I'll reread Matthew 24, 3 through 8. As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. "Tell us," they said, "when will this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" Jesus answered, "Watch out that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name claiming, 'I am the Messiah,' and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nations will rise against nation, and kingdoms against kingdoms. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains." And I'll reread Mark 13, 3 through 8. As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple, Peter, James, John, and Andrew asked him privately, "Tell us, when will these things happen, and what will be the sign that they are all about to be fulfilled?" Jesus said to them, "Watch out that no one deceives you. Many will come in my name, claiming, 'I am he,' and will deceive many. When you hear of wars and rumors of war, do not be alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nations will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places, and famines. These are the beginning of birth pains." Now let's add Luke's version in Luke 21, 7 through 11. "Teacher," they ask, "when will these things happen, and what will be the sign that they are about to take place?" He replied, "Watch out that you are not deceived, for many will come in my name, claiming, 'I am he,' and the time is near. Do not follow them. When you hear of wars and uprisings, do not be frightened. These things must happen first, but the end will not come right away." Then he said to them, "Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes, famines, and pestilences in various places, and fearful events, and great signs from heaven." The disciples asked Jesus when the end would happen and what signs they should look for that it was near. Jesus doesn't give them a date, but instead began to teach them about the signs of the end time. Jesus warned them of two things. First, if someone predicts when Jesus will return, it is 100% false. Warning number one, don't believe it. Don't be deceived. There will always be wars, and they are terrible, but that doesn't predict the end. Warning number two, don't assume the end is near because of the terribleness of war. Now, some of the signs mentioned by Matthew and Mark that Jesus' return is near are famines and earthquakes in various places. But Luke lists great earthquakes, famines, and pestilences in various places, and fearful events, and great signs from heaven. Do you see any of these signs happening today? I do. Jesus says these are the beginnings of birth pangs. Ask any woman who has given birth, and she will tell you that you can have birth pangs any time during the last 1/3 of the pregnancy, or as the fetus becomes heavier. We'll continue this discussion next time. In his service, Dale.